Welcome to part 2 of this deep dive into the best, worst and weirdest Die Hard knockoffs ever made. If you didn't see part 1, don't worry, it isn't complicated. But you missed Indian McLane doing action, Ty McLane doing Jim Catter, and Anna Nicole Smith McLane doing acting.
Well, excuse me for still believing in Sunday walks in the park and little babies.
The good news is there's a near endless supply of incredible and improbable Die Hard clones, which we can marvel. Jean-Claude Van Damme's died hard more than once, but his standout McLane is Darren McCord, the hero fire marshal who saves a hockey stadium full of people from Powers Booth's rent-a-nut in sudden death.
Go ahead. Dead heroes get the best funerals.
The film is conceived as a Beverly Hills Cop-type comedy before being rewritten as straight action, but pockets of absurdity remain and they're completely out of place. The scene in which Van Damme fights a penguin is an amusing remnant of the original concept, but my favourite hangover has him disguised as one of the players and saving a crucial goal for some reason.
Has to be the save of the year.
As far as his boy's concerned, that rectifies a lifetime of shoddy parenting, or induces some kind of embolism, I'm not sure.
You never seen Die Hard? Bruce Willis? Like all these terrorists, they took over this Nakatomi building and he's like, "Whoopie-ki-yay, motherfucker." Hey!
What the hell, man?
In 2020, Michael Jai White starred in a down and dirty remake, and while it's effectively the same plot, it retains the wild mix of peril, violence and comedy intended for the original.
Man, stop doing that.
It's a very ugly movie, completely lacking in originality, and feels like it was thrown together over a weekend. Every time the bad guys tap their AirPods to talk to each other, it just draws attention to the fact that's not how AirPods work. And that they're not AirPods. They've just cut the wires off normal earphones. But of course, all that really matters in a Michael Jai White movie is how badass Michael Jai White is.
If I submitted my real resume, you would have been too afraid to hire me.
No worries on that score. What people like White and Scott Adkins have been doing for the last few years is really impressive. With a fraction of the time and money enjoyed by the likes of Van Damme and Seagal back in the day, they frequently produce fight scenes light years ahead in terms of complexity and entertainment value. At the Atlanta Olympics, anti-abortionist homophobe Eric Rudolph detonated a bomb that killed 2 and injured over 100. That gave someone somewhere the idea for a movie reimagining the attack as part of a Die Hard scenario hostage-taking, with a limping janitor for the hero and a team of tactical golfers for the bad guys. The only reason to watch it happens 5 minutes from the end, when Rutger Hauer swings into action. We've only seen his Sergeant Al Powell via close-up sitting in darkness, but just as the SWAT team launches its attack, he appears from nowhere and rushes the entrance, revealing himself to be a legless American Indian in an electric wheelchair.
What the hell was that?
It's most unexpected, but I love how they spent the whole movie hiding it just for a reveal that probably wasn't meant to be so funny. Command Performance is one of those random B-movies that's inexplicably penetrated the mainstream bubble and appears on every other clickbait list of the best and worst Die Hard clones. But it's neither good or bad enough for either, despite starring Dolph Lundgren's veteran drummer as the McLane.
I gotta stop this shit.
It's written and directed by Dolph himself and always feels like it's about to get away from him, but he hangs on to deliver a fair movie and a good performance.
Didn't you rehearse down there?
We don't rehearse. We just play.
As Miss Galaxy, I would fight passionately for the rights of minorities and women.
No Contest keeps its focus on the bad guys throughout its beauty pageant heist. Maybe because they're particularly good value, or maybe because the producers were scared to hang the movie on Shannon Tweed's female McLane. She certainly didn't feature much in promo artwork that implies Andrew Dice Clay's the hero, which he very much isn't.
And if you have any doubts,
by murdering the newly crowned pageant winner before even issuing a demand, Raymond Ulysses Bryce proves himself capable of anything, and Clay sells it all so well he can be surprisingly scary. Whatever the comedian was channeling, it made for a memorable performance. Tweed stands out too as former beauty queen and current Hollywood action star Sharon Bell.
Sharon Bell? She's like a Bruce Lee with boobs, man.
The epic violence, moderate misogyny and bizarre fourth wall breaking gags like this radio-controlled booby trap all contribute to a tone that's so discombobulating even the characters don't know what's going on.
Listen, I said not now. We're trying to save some hostages here, all right?
We are the fucking hostages, you stupid pilot toad shit!
No Contest 2 shifts location to an art gallery and places a tighter focus on the core characters. That means Tweed returns to a bigger, better role, but unfortunately it's in a cheaper, duller movie. We're largely confined to one location and the action's on a smaller scale, although we do get to see our hero at her day job being a movie star.
See that moon up there?
That moon there is a full moon, which means she's on a cycle.
What? This is a disappointing sequel. There's no energy to the filmmaking, and even actors like Bruce Payne and Lance Henriksen are on autopilot. When you hire Lance Henriksen to play a Nazi nerve gas dealer, you take on certain obligations. You've failed to meet them if he spends his only memorable scene listing body fluids.
Like sweat. Or, saliva. Urine.
The Vault's also set in an art gallery, but has the enormous benefit of starring Lacey Zsazsa, who's since quit acting and now bills himself as an American knife designer on websites catering to angry incels. I'm calling fraud. These aren't knives, he's not an American, and he certainly wasn't an actor.
You know those, very big pretzels that you find only in New York? I love these things. I just love them. I don't know why, but...
Shot on the Valencia College campus in Florida and crewed by its film students, I haven't come across anything that can compete with The Vault as objectively the worst Die Hard clone ever made.
Get us into that vault! Martos, when you came to me, you said it was going to be a quick job.
You know how movies often end up with continuity issues when shots are used out of sequence? There's a famous example in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man when these windows mend themselves. And there's an apparently classic case in The Vault, when Hero borrows a skateboard that we later see back in place hanging on its nail. Nothing too unusual about that, except that it's meant to be a different room.
If you'd witnessed several people getting butchered just for trying to take cover, just for pleading for mercy, you wouldn't be thinking that he'd be lenient on anybody's life.
If The Vault struggles with too little star power, the alternate might have too much, because there isn't enough for everyone to do. Eric Roberts is the McLane, and he's backed up by Ice-T, who spends the movie grumbling in a black void, and Michael Madsen, who does likewise outside.
We can't do anything without them knowing about it. We can't even fart.
Then there's Brian Genesee's Gruber, who takes advantage of an extreme Muslim plot to kill the president at a fancy function by false flagging the situation while cleverly disguised as terrorist leader Ahmed.
I am Ahmed, and you are all guests of the Unified Terrorist Coalition. If any of you attempt to leave this room, you will die.
Why are you French? Given the cast, this is probably a good time to mention how often the same actors crop up in these movies.
Who's that prick? Oh, that prick's classified. You know that. All my pricks are.
I guess there was a limited number of Hollywood production companies churning these things out, and a limited number of name actors willing and able to add a little value to a cheapo action thriller. Whatever the reason, Michael Dudikoff, Steven Seagal, Andrew Divoff, Brian Genesee, Ice-T and others have each appeared in half a dozen or so tryhards, while Eric Roberts has played multiple McLanes, Grubers and every character in between. It's almost like this subgenre has its own little repertory company.
Why me? I'm not part of your crew. I'm just a replacement.
If there were a try-hard repertory company, Peter Weller would be an unlikely member. In Top of the World, he's an ex-cop in Vegas for his divorce when Crims raid the casino where soon-to-be ex-wife Tia Carrera works. Matters are complicated by Dennis Hopper, the casino boss who planned the robbery to cover mob debts and spends it killing his own men.
How's my girl?
I don't know.
How? He said he didn't know. I mean, how fucking rude is that, huh?
The plot machinations and changing allegiances mean there's always something heavy going on, but we get comedy relief from robbers best described as bumbling.
You're supposed to be dressed like a security guard. No, man, you said maintenance. No, man, I said a security guard. You said maintenance. I said security guard. This is not part of the plan.
They're led by Martin Kove, and his ability to be believably daft, deadly, useless and effective, as and when the script demands, is really impressive.
John's in laundry, and Mike here, he's in starch.
And Howard, he fluffs and I fold. The hell out of here.
This movie's tone could have been designed for Cove, who outside Karate Kid seems incapable of being serious.
Hold it! Lynn in my ass. Fluff this!
There's a freewheeling, slightly absurd vibe with a dark edge, as you may have realised. It's not so much tongue-in-cheek as wild and unruly, which is a nice way to channel the Vegas energy that permeates everything. Apparently they had the budget to shoot all over town, and they make the most of it, building the movie's world on Vegas cliches, designing set pieces around its landmarks, and generally showing off the fact they're really there and they're really blowing bits of it up. Gilbert Poe, the director of Die Hard in Space classic Assault on Dome 4, once told me he regretted being responsible for the worst Bruce Campbell movie ever made. On one hand, it was nice to share my view that Assault on Dome 4 isn't even the worst Die Hard clone in which Bruce Campbell plays the villain. On the other hand, that means Icebreaker's real.
There's some strange shit happening at the local ski resort. So?
Basically, it's Die Hard by way of cliffhanger and a preposterous disapproving father-in-law subplot.
People like you do not marry people like Matt.
But before any of that, we're dazzled by the title sequence. You're opening your movie with a muddy car park and a short queue. That's one link in a chain of bizarre decisions leading back to pre-production, when Bruce Campbell was cast to play a character who's miserable, low energy and humourless.
Think about that.
You don't cast Bruce Campbell as a character who's miserable, low energy and humourless. Going toe-to-toe with Campbell's villain is Sean Astin's dynamic, irresistible ski patrol hunk.
What?
You don't cast Sean Astin as a dynamic, irresistible ski hunk. Elsewhere we get Suzanne Turner as the love interest and Stacy Keach as her acerbic, take-no-shit father.
You are gonna die just like the rest of us.
Stop it!
You do cast Stacy Keach as an acerbic, take-no-shit father.
I had a delightful evening in a one-bedroom timeshare.
And you have him say timeshare as often as possible.
Timeshare.
This movie's still an idiot. The henchwoman's killed when a videotape's thrown at her. The finale has Holly and McLanes lobbing literal snowballs at Gruber. And a bar manager thinks this is a good idea.
Crack a couple extra kegs and start serving free beer on the deck. That should quiet down the loud ones.
No situation in history has been quietened down with 2 kegs of free beer.
It seems that our laboratory rat has reached a dead end, haven't you, Mr. Wilde? Mr. Sergeant Jack Wilde of the Chicago Police Department.
In Crackerjack, negligible 90s action hero Thomas Ian Griffith plays a cop wallowing in such self-pitying dysfunction it was only a matter of time until an action movie happened to him. And for a while it looks like being Lethal Weapon.
You know what they've been calling you for the past few months down at the precinct? Crackerjack.
But Die Hard always prevails.
I'm on your side, asshole!
Crackerjack's on the edge because he's constantly subjected to flashbacks of his wife's murder. So to help him over it, his brother and sister-in-law throw a party. It goes so well they decide to take a holiday together, and luckily for Crackerjack, other guests at their Rocky Mountain resort include the men responsible for his wife's murder. Luckily for us, they're led by Christopher Plummer, who's there to rob a mafia don of $50 million in diamonds.
Where are they?
It's not a bad movie, but Jack's a poor protagonist. He's too serious and intense, never letting up on his remorse, and it makes him terrible company. Plummer's infinitely better as the big bad Ivan Getz, a former East German Stasi agent turned international man of eccentricity.
Lady Luck isn't just smiling. She's spreading her legs for us.
Fittingly, Jack doesn't really beat him. Getz's helicopter clips a random flagpole and crashes, leaving him with no means of escape. Just as offbeat but rather more inspired was the filmmaker's choice of replacement for Thomas Ian Griffiths in the sequel. All rise for the Honourable Judge Reinhold. It's like casting Martin Short as Martin Riggs, only it changes everything for the better. I love that Reinhold just wanted to play the renegade action cop for once, and to hell with how inappropriate he was for it.
Arrest this insubordinate son of a bitch. Now you cuff him and book him. What charge?
Embarrassing a superior officer.
No, obstruction of justice.
Because Jack Wilde, his surname's Wilde, has a different persona and is played by a different actor, it's made clear who he is with a familiar moment of sad reflection for his murdered wife, carefully edited to remove Griffith. Then everything's confused by the announcement this movie's villain is the one responsible for her death, inexplicably retconning the first movie in the process.
Get off my case, motherfucker!
It looks cheap compared to the first movie, but Reinhold's worth more than money can measure. With Jack Wilde's backstory remaining the same, he's presumably still meant to be downbeat and aloof, but Reinhold's jovial buffoonery is irrepressible, so he's cool enough to get the girl, but goofy enough to make an arse of himself doing it. Basically, he's half Axel Foley, half Billy Rosemont.
It's Rosewood, sir.
Despite Reinhold, this thing's barely worthy of late-night terrestrial television.
Come on, we're talking cable.
In a remote temple somewhere in the forests of Northern California, a ninja master trains 3 young students in the ancient art of ninjutsu, subjecting them to the same grueling initiation endured by 100 generations of shinobi warrior.
You all pass with flying colors.
So they're ninjas now, but instead of being sent to murder a feudal warlord, they're taken to Mega Mountain, a theme park at which Hulk Hogan's TV action star Dave Dragon is making an appearance. The inevitable terrorists arrive on jet skis led by Jim Varney and Lonnie Anderson, who, when not being somewhat inappropriate for a children's movie, replaced the park's entire staff with their own mercenaries, who were also somewhat inappropriate for a children's movie, then threaten to kill hostages if they aren't paid $10 million by the owner.
All those heartbroken families, the cover of Time magazine, you'll be the owner of Murder Mountain.
Is this a children's movie?
Harry, when can we go shopping for my new Mercedes?
Children like cars, so the 3 ninjas employ their skills in a series of fights that vindicate the rest of the movie. It's sold on kids doing ninja stuff and it delivers kids doing ninja stuff. At one point Jim Varney tries to decapitate one of them and another gets lamped in the face. I love 90s movies, and this haircut. Somehow it incorporates each of the 2 styles available to white teenage boys of the era.
Can I help you?
Yes, you can help me. By going to sleep.
Hulk Hogan's absent for the first half and unconscious for most of the second, but he does make a brief appearance in between. Ultimately, he isn't needed because the ninjas make friends with an Andy Sedaris fan who blows up the bad guys with a radio-controlled boat bomb. While we're dealing with children and their shenanigans, Toy Soldiers is clearly the daddy of the Die Hard in a School subset. The tale of bad guys holding rich kids for ransom in an elite academy is one of the most popular Die Hard knockoffs. But the problem is it's just a reasonably well-made thriller. As ever, there's a crappy alternative employing exactly the same formula, and it's called Masterminds.
We're talking hardcore artillery here, man. I'm telling you, we got a die-hard situation here.
Despite starring Patrick Stewart, though, it's even less entertaining than Toy Soldiers.
You little bugger.
But there is at least one worthwhile teen McLane out there.
Oh, shit!
The notion of a Die Hard prequel's been floating around Hollywood for years, with producer Lorenzo de Bonaventura only recently giving up on a project with Die Hard 4 director Len Wiseman. But if a school-age McLane saving teachers from Gruber's is your thing, Jim Wynorski has you covered.
What do you people think you're doing here?
Anything we want.
Don't hurt me! Don't hurt me!
On paper, Demolition High is just another school-based try-hard, but Corey Haim's Lenny Slater proves such a perfect John McClane imitation it feels like canon. It's exactly how you'd imagine him being in high school.
Come on, pervert.
You slapped my ass in a guy's locker room? You call me a pervert?
John Jr.'s just transferred in from New York, and he's having trouble with bullies who've transferred in from the land of make-believe teenagers.
Lenny Slater, how you doing?
Lenny? Well, that sounds like a real wuss name to me.
Lenny the Lesbo.
But on the bright side, he has a love interest who's transferred in from her mid-30s, and together they run interference when bad guys take over the school to do robbery. Rather than a psych ward or prison, Lenny Slater headed to college after Demolition High and was soon just as popular with the bullies there.
Slater! You dickhead!
You couldn't catch flies if you were covered in dog shit.
Technically, most of Demolition University takes place in a power plant rather than a school, but it repeats the first film's formula beat for beat, with a little more inadvertent comedy and a little less charm.
What do you want? Shut up.
The more grown-up Corey Haim isn't quite as likeable, and he was off his head during production, so his performance suffers. But he still had charisma to burn.
I have a rule about dating jocks.
That's okay, so do I.
The villains are fun too, because they're comprised of both disaffected US military and Muslim fundamentalists, and the two factions aren't what you'd call ideologically compatible.
She is my sister. Oh, I should have noticed the family resemblance. You both have the same machine guns, but she's got that extra pair of .38s.
I've explained before why I don't cover spoofs in these videos, but I almost made an exception for Glenn Burgetz's To Die Is Hard, about an English professor defending his school from bad guys.
Should be gravy.
It's funny, but if I open the door to parodies, I'll have to watch Paul Blart Mall Cop, and... no. While I'm on the subject of things I'm not covering, it's incredible what the internet has to say about Die Hard clones. Almost all of those top 10s recycle the same movies, and few of them have much to do with Die Hard. Among the most persistent offenders are The Rock, Con Air and Cliffhanger. I could make a case for all of them, but they deviate in crucial ways and compromise otherwise streamlined plots with soap opera diversions. Essentially though, they're each their own high concept.
They somehow managed to get every creep and freak in the universe onto this one plane, and then somehow managed to let them take it over.
The most popular of these pseudo-tryhards is different, because I'm not sure it contains any Die Hard DNA. According to Ranker, Collider, Decider, IGN, Slashfilm, and presumably dozens of others, Speed is the definitive Die Hard ripoff.
You're crazy.
It's a great movie, but it has nothing to do with Die Hard. Beyond the generic, none of Die Hard's defining elements apply, and the most important one, McLane being a reluctant hero in the wrong place at the wrong time, couldn't be more different, because Keanu Reeves' Jack is a SWAT leader who lives for this kind of thing and was targeted by the bad guy. Remember,
the last thing McLane wants is to be a hero.
The only Die Hard influence I see in Speed is a conscious decision not to be Die Hard.
Maybe.
Sadly, I can't say the same about Speed 2. The ways in which Speed 2 fails seem almost decadent when compared to other movies. Its makers had all this money and with it the ability to skate over most of the swampy mires that bogged down B-grade tryhards. So they had to invent problems, and casting Jason Patric to replace Keanu Reeves was a good place to start.
Perfectly reasonable.
Bo Svensson was right there, wasted in a tiny role. Make him the McLane, and pair him with Lois Childs. She's just hanging around doing nothing too. So what if they're older? They transform the movie.
We'll do just that.
Bullock's Annie Porter's an unbearable whining incompetent now, for some reason written like a character we're supposed to hate, not a protagonist we want to go on a cruise with. Why is she in the movie anyway? Because she drove the bus? There's nothing for her to do but get in the way, and she keeps nearly killing people.
Oh, sorry! Oh, sorry!
Willem Dafoe's Gruber should redeem everything, but he's hardly in it because the screenplay's drunk. He has no team, no demands, lets the hostages go and largely ignores the McLane, so there's nothing for him to do either. He programs the virtually empty cruise ship to hit an oil tanker, then waits to fly off in his getaway plane with some loot, straight towards the oil tanker. The whole movie's been about making sure the oil tanker doesn't blow up because it's full of people and ecological horror, and then it just happens as an afterthought. Completely by accident and without any purpose.
All right, but I never got my drink. Would you just mind if I...
Final Voyage is marginally more fun, partly because there are hijackings of both aeroplane and cruise ship, partly because Ice-T plays an intellectual.
Use of that word is flipping at best, friend.
The OG's no idiot, but the mental leap required to accept him as a cultured sophisticate is significant.
Only committee thinking could bring such a beautiful opportunity.
The villain in Escape Under Pressure is also hard to take seriously because he's named after a cultist, Aleister Crowley. He's a treasure hunter who has a Greek artifact confiscated on his way out of the country, so does the only reasonable thing by hijacking and sinking the ship the sculpture's being transported on, and using a pirate submarine to retrieve it.
Can I help you?
Actually, yes.
I'd like to take command of the ship.
Rob Lowe and estranged wife Larissa Miller are on the ship too, but they can't live up to the crazy concept or the crazy villain, who I think is English.
Bloody Manchester United cost me £1,000.
I mentioned earlier that high-risk director Wong Jing was one for a wacky tone, and in City Hunter he had the opportunity to exercise that proclivity on a grand scale and with Jackie Chan. There are a lot of jokes and they come in two varieties, sex and children's, which means we can't be sure whether any given scene's leading to an attempted rape or a telegraphed pratfall. Somehow this is one of Jackie's most adult films and one of his most childish, which might be why he hates it so much. He plays Ryo Saba, the detective protagonist of Tsukasa Hojo's 80s manga, opposite the bad guys of Richard Norton and Gary Daniels, who take over a cruise ship in order to extort money from the wealthy passengers.
All ties to the bank. Next.
For me, this has the best action of any Die Hard clone. The sense of humour is divisive, but the choreography isn't, although the scene in which Jackie turns into various Street Fighter characters may be a bit much for some. The final fight, though, which took nearly 7 weeks to shoot, is one for the ages. It plays brilliantly to the strengths of both Norton, who's an expert in melee weapons and one of few foreign fighters to thrive in the Hong Kong film industry, and Jackie, who's always been more inspired by Buster Keaton than Bruce Lee. A couple of years later, a City Hunter reference popped up in The Red Wolf.
All right, time out.
A less goofy Die Hard on a ship in which Christy Chung's good-natured pickpocket and Kenny Ho's damaged security guard team up to stop thieves getting hold of plutonium. Yuen Woo-ping, the director of Drunken Master and fight choreographer of The Matrix, keeps things buttoned down for the first half hour, but soon unleashes the full force of the Hong Kong stunt community and the Die Hard trope generator. Once up to speed, the only reason the movie ever slows down again is so people can torment this little girl.
Will you save me if I fall in the sea?
Of course I won't.
I don't know why Yun picks her out for special treatment, but she loses her dad straight away.
You'll have to learn to live without your daddy. You know that?
Her mother's then gunned down trying to protect her, and she spends the rest of the movie being kidnapped, threatened, chased, strapped to a bomb and hung from a rope.
Andy, I'm scared.
No shit. But The Red Wolf's about action, not child abuse, and on that score it's impeccable. I have no idea how to rate movies like this. The choreography is incredible, the technical aspects are strong, and the one objectively weak link, the dubbing, isn't the movie's fault.
Tell me, Alan. Have you been through this kind of thing before?
Yes. The last time I lost my wife.
There are a number of Die Hard clones set on submarines, but despite it being made by people who can't even be bothered to hot glue a calculator to the wall, the only one vaguely worthy of attention is Agent Red, in which Dolph Lundgren has to stop a militia group destroying the world.
That sounds like a bad action movie.
Their plans to steal and release a pathogen so unpleasant it has the same effect on the human body as a good day to die hard.
By the 9th minute, you're projectile vomiting as the body starts to shut down. At 10 minutes, you're bleeding from your rectum, eyes, nose, and nipples.
I am sorry.
With Bruce Willis shooting hit TV show Moonlighting simultaneously with Die Hard, his time on set was limited, which led to several supporting characters being beefed up. That gave them more depth, a happy accident that's one of the reasons they work so well. But I mention it now because the producers of Under Siege employed a similar strategy upon deciding Steven Seagal couldn't act.
What kind of babbling bullshit is this?
And the movie benefits in the same way. Villains Gary Busey and Tommy Lee Jones know exactly what to do with additional screen time, and egg each other on to extraordinary heights.
Do I look like I need a psychological evaluation?
It makes Seagal's self-important intensity even funnier than usual, with Tommy Lee Jones in particular turned up to a tongue-in-cheek 11 that leaves him struggling for breath by the end of the movie.
Little hats, little chaps, little pistols. Bam, bam, bam! Shooting back over their shoulders. Rescue that lobster from the Swedish cook.
Seagal plays Chief Casey Ryback, a highly decorated Navy SEAL who got so cool he has to be a cook now. As with every Seagal movie, the tension's completely drained by his unrelenting amazingness, not to mention a preoccupation with pies.
Go get my pies out of the oven!
There's never a sense he won't prevail, so the stakes are non-existent. But it doesn't matter, because this is an incredible film. It's genuinely well directed, but it's also laced with the wanton idiocy of a parody, and as amiably unimaginative as any straight-to-video cash-in. The best of all worlds then. And ironically, it features one of Seagal's best performances.
Get my pies out of the oven!
You really believe he cares about those pies. For the sequel, Seagal was given a sidekick so he'd have someone to talk to about how amazing he is.
You think this is being shot? This ain't being shot.
Morris Chestnut does what he can with the role, but his underwritten single-purpose character is emblematic of a broader phenomenon. Seagal's ego was off the rails and people were listening to him.
What am I doing? Oh, I'm making a bomb.
Originally, the finale, in which he must overcome the villain's cutting-edge computer encryption to save the day, had a clever tech-based solution. But Seagal back didn't like that, so... You can just shoot cybersecurity?
Hola, Marina.
No, I won't go to the cockfights with you.
When serial train hijacker Bentley Mitchum's caught for a broken glass heist, police cop Brian Genesee must travel to Mexico and oversee his return to the US. By train.
It's a choo-choo.
I'm not sure the Mexican cop in charge knows what he's doing, but he can withstand even the saltiest of zingers.
I buried my tongue in your mom's shit-caked ass last night.
Why? When the unthinkable happens, it's the most reckless hostage-taking imaginable, which isn't a surprise given it's conducted by the cast of Shark Attack 3. George Stanchev here played John Barrowman's sidekick Essay. Basha Rahal was life jacket-stealing resort chief Luis Ruiz. Nikolai Sorotov was Davis, the cameraman who gets eaten.
And you'd do anything for that ass.
Fucking ain't right, man.
Come on.
And although Mitchum himself wasn't in Shark Attack 3, he was in the original movie.
You're the one who stole my thumpers. And gave them to him. And he used them to kill the tourist business.
Yes, literally. But when Hacker told me about your little thumpers, well, that was simply divine.
The Earth has been laid waste, fit only for the dead and the damned.
Dead Fire takes place on a space station housing the cryogenically suspended remnants of mankind, and I don't know if that means it should be more interesting than it is, or explains why it's so dull, but only Matt Frewer delivers as the Gruber.
Ahoy there, matey! Long time no see.
Not since the taking of Beverly Hills in Part 1. It's here because it features the stupidest elevator shaft scene of any Die Hard clone. As usual, McLane's clambering about messing with C4 when the elevator begins descending towards him. With nowhere to go, he's forced to jump, and as the shaft links two space stations, it's long, which allows this to happen. It's all the more marvellous for being built around the concept of gravity when there shouldn't be any. The ending doesn't make sense either. Everyone thinks C. Thomas Howell's a leading scientist who'll be able to calculate a complicated piece of astronavigation, but he's actually a flaky pool hustler unfrozen by mistake. Luckily, he's prepared for the job at hand because, like pool, physics is just geometry and velocity. They keep saying that. So he plugs a pool app into space and performs all the necessary manipulations within the game.
Oh, no.
The cue ball's coming back at you. You're gonna tear him off what's left of the atmosphere.
Presumably they got the idea from Red Dwarf, where it was a joke.
We are talking about the trigonomics of four-dimensional space, you simple-minded gimboid. We are not talking about some seedy game of pool in a backstreet scouse drinking pit.
I don't like leaving a Die Hard in space on the table, but I can't abide Velocity Trap star Olivier Gruner.
People think I'm very funny, actually.
So I'm going to keep going to a movie featuring an actor everybody likes.
Please excuse the mess. My men will have it cleaned up lickety-split.
In the near future, master criminal Alex Wyndham arrives at the galaxy's highest security prison complex on Mars, where we know full well he won't be serving his multiple life sentences.
Is spitting permitted here?
No.
After making their escape, Wyndham and his gang seize Dome 4, a science and mining colony on an unnamed neighbouring planet, where their objective is to build bombs for reasons. They do it at Dome 4 because it has a plutonium mine, presumably under the magnesium orchard. But what Wyndham doesn't know is that space cop extraordinaire Chase Moran is paying his wife a surprise visit there.
What the hell were you doing here?
We learnt from Icebreaker that Bruce Campbell isn't suited to playing sincere villains, and one of many reasons Dome 4's a more enjoyable movie is director Gilbert Poe seems to understand that.
I will cut your dear wife open and eat her heart out with a spoon.
The actor's at his best parodying the Three Stooges, and the fact he's the villain here doesn't change anything. So Wyndham's basically Bruce Campbell, only evil.
Oh, Lily, your neck tastes like Loganberry.
Despite anticipating a chunk of The Rock, the movie itself is surprisingly committed to Die Hard, faithfully recreating space versions of every scene and shot it can afford, and even delivering a Marvin, the crusty janitor from Die Hard 2. That's a rare enough occurrence to be exciting in its own right, but Mello, as he's called, is played by Jack Nance, a Razorhead himself. And in typically whimsical fashion, he spends the movie either asleep or shouting about piss and corruption.
Piss and corruption.
This really is a one-man show, though.
Did you know that I have a mouse in my house?
Normally I finish these videos by complaining about the state of modern genre cinema and slagging off The Asylum, but good Die Hard clones are still being made. Films like Olympus Has Fallen are much more than the half-assed echo of a dying subgenre, and generally avoid modern trends for too much self-awareness and Chris Pratt, though it's a mystery what makes this franchise special.
Well, right now I think I have the proverbial need to fucking know.
The Has Fallen movies are produced by Millennium, whose Die Hard clones traditionally star Steven Seagal's stunt double alongside people like Vinnie Jones.
Okay, now, tell me your Father Christmas.
But these things are a world apart. The raid on the White House was conceived by former Secret Service agents challenged to come up with the most plausible attack, and it's an incredible action scene. The supporting cast are quietly amazing, the jingoism's off the chart, and Gerard Butler does a top-drawer McLane.
Why don't you and I play a game of fuck off? You go first.
I don't know what more you'd want from a modern action movie, apart from maybe intelligence, subtlety and restraint. Speaking of which...
Oh my god, that's President Sawyer. He has a rocket launcher.
White House Down is a little less believable and a fair bit dumber, which is an achievement, not a complaint. Channing Tatum's a loser with no business being on a White House tour, let alone trying to blag his way into the Secret Service. Jamie Foxx plays man who quite likes peace but really likes Air Jordans.
Get your hands off my Jordans!
And James Woods is a neoconservative revolutionary trying to justify a coup. Must have been a challenge?
Let's just keep it professional, okay?
Despite reflecting a more liberal political philosophy than Olympus Has Fallen, there's no less patriot-exploitation on display. In fact, there's probably more. In just one scene, the Commander-in-Chief's life is saved by Abraham Lincoln's pocket watch and a little girl waving the flag of the president on the lawn of a flaming White House.
We have a young girl on the lawn. I think she's trying to wave off the airstrike. I'm not doing this, guys. Abort mission. Pull out. Abort. Abort. Abort.
Of course, not all modern tryhards take such delight in their absurdity, and misery porn McLanes have inevitably become a thing. But tortured alcoholics really don't belong here.
Am I in your way, asshole?
Good or bad, the movies in this video are all fun, in one way or another, because I left out the ones that aren't, which more often than you'd believe involve Michael Dudikoff on a submarine.
If the submarine is attacked, or if the missile is detonated prematurely, this entire ocean goes up in a mushroom cloud.
I nearly dropped Police Story Lockdown for that reason, but it proves a point. I don't want to watch 2 minutes of Jackie Chan desperately choking someone to death. I want to watch him being an affable underdog. That's not to say Jackie Chan movies need a light touch, but apparently Die Hard clones do. The original film set a tone with its gallows humour and straight-up comedy characters. And from Air Force One to Under Siege, none of the better good knockoffs take themselves seriously.
Tomahawks!
Of course, the better bad ones often do, but that's part of their appeal.
Every hostage I kill jerks your scrotum up around your neck.
Or not, in the case of Deadlock, a modern try-hard I'd happily have ignored if not for the way it brings everything full circle, with a Gruber played by the boss himself.
That's who the fuck I am.
There are worse recent Bruce Willis movies, and the actor was never beyond reproach for his choices.
Hard to argue with that one.
But there's inevitably something a little sad about the real McLane returning to the well in a movie like this, however unofficial.
Thought all this meant something.
Right-wing militant Ron Whitlock has plenty of screen time, but he's subject to endless cutaways when talking, presumably because Willis was struggling to memorise lines due to his condition, and unfortunately that proves to be an inescapable reminder he really wasn't well and should probably have been at home.
You weren't supposed to be here!
But for every deadlock, there's a security, with Antonio Banderas as a malcop who understands the value of that light touch, and Ben Kingsley as a villain who understands the value of bringing your A-game even to a disposable mid-budget actioner.
Which is the less right, Vance? One pain in the ass girl out of your hair and you getting rich, or every last one of you dying horribly and nobody getting rich?
And of all the movies in my Die Hard database, the one with the highest ratings from the usual sources is actually one of the most recent.
Time to tango.
In Sanak, a mixed martial artist trapped in a hospital siege forms an alliance with a no-nonsense policewoman to resolve a classic Die Hard scenario. And it's brilliant. Films like these ensure the subgenre isn't just alive and kicking, but evolving and finding new audiences without losing its DNA or complicating its appeal. So that's it. If I've learnt anything from watching 150 Die Hard clones, it's that Die Hard clones really aren't that bad. Cloned subgenres usually feature a forgotten swamp of the unimaginable lurking beyond the vaguely worthy. But that isn't the case with Die Hard, and in a way that demonstrates the movie's brilliance. Its core group of creatives came up with a formula that's almost idiot-proof.
Bow your fucking heads, you heathens!
All you have to do is join the dots and the resulting movie will probably work.
You say so?
Thanks for watching and see you soon.
Yippee-yi-yo-ki-yay, yippee-yi-yo-ki-yay.
If you're so inclined, please consider supporting me on Patreon, or just recommending this rubbish to someone who'll appreciate it. And if you feel the need for a book collecting virtually every superhero movie ever made, join literally some others by clicking the link in the description.